Hello music makers, welcome back. A few weeks ago I reviewed the Scalar plugin, and I was not shy about expressing my frustrations. In fact, in the middle of that review, I was so frustrated that I thought there must be a better way, and I went searching for an alternative. A few of you had mentioned the Chords plugin. Luckily, as I was searching, it was on sale. I was also pleasantly surprised to find out it was made by Mixed in Key, a DJ-focused brand. So, in theory, this should be a lot better for dance music than the more classically focused Scalar, right? Let's find out, shall we? So I'm going to do the same thing as the Scalar review, put myself in the shoes of a beginner as much as possible, and also like the Scalar review, this video is not sponsored. I bought the plugins myself, and the developer will not see this video before it airs. So if you don't know, the Captain plugins are actually a bundle of 5 plugins. There's Captain Beat, Captain Deep, Chords, Captain Melody, and then the last plugin is called Captain Play, which is for jamming live, either chords or melodies. At first, I went in blind, and the first plugin I tried was Captain Beat. When you load that, the first thing you're greeted with is a 4/4 kick drum. And in terms of sound, it's not bad. Straight away, I found this quite encouraging, as this seems to suggest that the plugin is geared towards dance music, or certainly electronic music, unlike Scalar. By the way, the pattern is automatically looped, regardless of what's going on in your DAW, so that's handy. The first buttons we're presented with, top left, we have Edit, Pencil, and Magic Record. Edit is for moving stuff around. Pencil lets you add more hits. And Magic Record lets you jam live, each sound already having an assigned key on your QWERTY keyboard. So if you don't own a controller, no problem. You don't have to be a good player either. Anything you input will be snapped to grid. If you want to keep some human feel though, you can adjust how severe the snapping is with the quantize style. You can access more sounds with this button down here. It works very similar to Ableton's fold function, in that sounds that aren't used are folded away in here. Many of you who won't be inspired to play though will want to check out the preset patterns. Those are selected here. Straight away, it's good to know everything's sorted by genre and there's lots to choose from. It's all synced to your software's tempo, of course, so I'm currently set to 126, so let's check out some house. There's quite the range in there, some simple stuff and some quite complex stuff. So if we back out of the pattern selection for a second, this next feature I really like. It lets you add a drum fill. Obviously, we won't want that every 8 bars, but we can either add that as a separate section up here where it says verse, or we can drag all of this out into our software later, either as MIDI or audio. I'll show you that in a moment. Next up is where we select the drum kit. Some of those patterns we auditioned clearly don't work on this particular drum set, so naturally you're going to want to audition different sounds too, and if we click here, there's lots to choose from. However, this is my first complaint with the plugin. The drum kits aren't sorted by genre. And as you'll hear, just browsing through electronic here, there's lots of sounds which aren't working with our house pattern. So in terms of trying to get inspired, trying to get some fast ideas together, good workflow, I'd say this area needs the most work in Captain Beat. Future Ben here. Having played with all of the other plugins at this point, it turns out this is a bit of an anomaly. It's just this section in this plugin that doesn't let you sort by genre. All of the other plugins and the rest of the sections in this plugin do. So I asked on their official YouTube channel, on the Captain Beat tutorial, why can't we browse kits by genre? And even though that video is 3 years old now, they just replied. And great news, they've said they're going to add it to a future update. Wonderful. Thank you to the Mixed in Key team. I'll look forward to it. While we're on the subject, if Mixed In Key are watching, may I request a sound lock option. So for example, if I really like this kick drum, I can lock it in, and then when I'm auditioning other kits, the kick drum won't change, only the rest will. That would be super useful, thank you. Now, as for the rest of the controls on the left here, I found this slightly unintuitive. I presumed this filter and volume down here would be for the selected track, like my kick drum or my snare drum. But no, those are global, those are for the entire plugin. The individual track controls are up top here. Under Basics, you can select the individual track's rhythm and sound. Here you can also drag in your own samples. Under Controls, we have some basic envelope controls, pitch, volume and pan. So if I wanted a snappier clap, I could shorten that and or pitch it up. And under Effects, we have a dual purpose filter. So it's a low pass if you drag it left, and a high pass if you drag it right. There's a reverb and a delay. One more criticism I have is the reverb. I'm not sure if it changes per kit, but by default, I've not found a very useful one yet. However, if you go into the hidden controls of the plugin, these are all the mappable controls that Ableton can see, not necessarily what's on the interface. And in here, there is a selectable reverb type. It defaults to this massive arena, which is way too big for most applications, and literally any of the other selections are better. Hall, spring, plate, room. So that seems like a strange oversight. Anyway, the last tab is Export. That lets you drag the MIDI pattern or the audio directly into your software, and you can choose that for the individual track you have highlighted or the entire thing. I really like the fact that it lets you grab the audio. It's practically instant too. No need to hit render or export. It must always be rendering in the background. Very clever. Hello, Future Ben again. Note to the devs, I've just spotted in all the other plugins, the export is in the bottom right, and it's always available. Only in the Beat plugin is it hidden away in this tab up here. I don't know if that's an oversight or if it's to declutter the interface of this particular plugin. I'm just thinking of beginners again, and consistency across all the plugins would be nice. Okay, on to Captain Deep. Unlike Scalar, we don't have to program any chords before we can have fun with a bass line. And speaking of more features which are the opposite of Scalar, look at the first screen we are greeted with. We're asked already, what key do we want to write in? Hooray! So we get to lock in our scale now, just as it should be. We can pick from a list if we already know, like we're already working with a vocal sample or something, or we can YOLO and randomize. I'm just going to stick with A minor, the default. You could even argue A minor is the default of this entire channel. Anyway, so the first thing we are encouraged to do is click the plus icon. But strangely, that just creates 4 notes at A-2. What a mess. I suppose I should have seen that coming. In the top left is the rhythm selection, and it defaults to quarter notes. How inspiring. Ironically, this is the first selection from the popular category. Is this really a popular rhythm? I suppose I've heard it in one song. Anyway, there's plenty more to choose from in this category. However, strangely, if I choose the same rhythm from this place, not adding it with the plus symbol, it fills the whole 5-bar loop with A0. Why is it a different octave, and why is it a different loop length? Strange. Moving on, I do like that we have genre-based selections as well, and there certainly seems like there's lots to choose from here. Strangely, not too many in the house category, but there are plenty of housey ones around. There's a category search instead of genre search as well. There are some classical terms in here, but there's lots of useful ones too. The dotted category is good for lots of styles of dance music. You might know that already if you watched enough of my rhythm videos. I like that a lot of these lines have space. Not everything is busy and completely filled. Again, unlike Scalar. As for sounds, my first impression, very good. especially considering the price of this plugin suite, which I'll discuss later. There's lots of very usable sounds in here. They seem to cover most areas, or you can load a plugin of your choice inside here. Or if you have a plugin already loaded on a track in your DAW, you can send the MIDI straight out to that. My only major complaint with the sounds is that some of the presets swap octaves. More inexperienced producers will just hear this as a sound that doesn't work and then move on and found a sound that they do like. But they would have far more options of sounds they like if all the sounds were just in the right octave. This feature I like the idea of, a paintbrush. Because we're already fixed in a scale, we can't technically make any wrong notes. So for those that don't have great pitch ear training yet, which will be most of you, even though you don't know the actual notes you want, most can still hear whether they want the line to go generally up or down. So why not paint it? Let's have a go. First pick a rhythm, and then just paint across. Working. It's a bit of a shame that the rhythm selection in the brush tool is from this menu, covers the entire screen, and doesn't update live. Also, all the categories are different. Why can't it all be just the same as this menu? Strange. Last but not least, my final complaint about Captain Deep. Where do I save my preset? Obviously, I can favorite my favorite rhythms with the heart symbol, but there doesn't seem to be a way to save a whole preset. All of the other plugins in the suite have a button over here to save the preset. Is this an oversight? Even if I had just made a custom rhythm and wanted to save that, there's no way to do that. If I go over to the user section over here, it changes everything I've just done to the first selection in the user bank. And unlike the melody plugin in this suite, I can't lock in notes to stop them changing for some reason. Hopefully those few quirks are something that can be changed. Okay, let's have a look at the main event, Captain Chords. Let's drag that into a new track. Again, we're asked what key we want to be in. Good. But does that mean it's independent of our bass plugin now? No, it appears to have synced. That's our bass part in the background there. Nice. That makes me wonder, will the bass part follow if we change chords? I'll see later. First, let's find a good chords part. So the first function up here is progression. I don't want to make a progression just yet. First, let's see if I can make a part which goes with my bass. The bass is just mostly on the 1, so there is no progression to follow. Should be fairly simple, in theory. Okay, let's hit the plus icon. That's not a good start, is it? It's added a chord, but why has my bass changed octave? At least undo on this plugin changes the bass as well. So let me check, does it matter where in pitch I click this plus? Can I try it lower? No. It starts my chord on A3, which isn't a problem in itself. I just don't understand why my bass is changing. The bass should stay where the bass should be, regardless of what the chords are doing. Okay then, so from that it appears that the chords plugin is kind of the master of the rest of them. Musically, this does make sense. We saw with the scaler plugin that it forced you to make chords before you could do anything else. And as I said in my last melody video, everything implies some kind of chord, even if the chord isn't actually there. Chords underlie everything else. So I get it. It's just a shame that we can't dictate the chord direction with the bass first, if that's the one that's loaded first, or be able to select which of the plugins is the master. As I said in the scaler video, I think it's a lot more intuitive that a dance producer or artist would start with drums or bass. At least this let us get a bass idea down first. Right, so let's change that bass octave and hopefully our chords won't change in response. Good. Right, let's find some chord rhythms. I'm already presuming this plugin will do held pads just fine. That's the easy thing to do. But can it do rhythmic stabs? Well, let's have a look at this rhythm section. Good to see. We've got these categories again. So we've got popular, genres. Again, seems to be plenty of choice. This tap rhythm. Can I shorten the notes manually? Yes, I can. Good. Let's have a look at some sounds. Again, overall, great selection. In fact, something I forgot to mention in the bass plugin is Mixed in Key have done a collaboration with Kilohertz, and the sounds with this little icon on them are running on the Phase Plant synth engine, and they have a lot more sound design options than the other sounds. So there's a full synth under here, not just samples. Good stuff. My only complaint about the sounds is the same as the bass. Some of them change octave for no reason. I quite like this back to square one sound. I appreciate the pun too. Okay, let's have a play around with some chord types. You can see at the top we're on scale degree 1, chord 1, and underneath that I like that we just have a small selection of the essentials here. And even if we don't know what those names mean, we can click on one and it changes live. No need to drag them down or anything, so that's great for going by your ears. One strange behavior I have noticed with this, however, is if you select a chord with a lot of extensions, like this 13th here, that's a 7-note chord. However, if you then go back to a 3-note chord, like the sus2 or the original minor, for some reason it keeps the total number of notes. So now we have a 3-note chord made up of 6 or 7 notes, duplicated octaves basically. That would be okay if we wanted to look at voicing options, but that's what these complexity buttons are for. And sure, I could use those buttons to bring it back down, but this doesn't behave well all the time either. Sometimes it doesn't get us back to where we were. Surely I should be able to click on the original button and get back to the original chord. This makes it impossible to A/B between different chord types in their original states. And in fact, if you try that, it just keeps growing. Just going back between two chord types means I end up with chords which are stacked octaves high. After only a few clicks, they're off the screen. Surely this is a bug. I don't see how that is helpful at all. The only real way to A/B chord types is to undo every choice. But then I found another bug. If I pressed undo too much, my bass line would change. Surely this would be much more intuitive if by default it does not add any complexity unless I ask it to. Anyway, I like the sound of this minor ninth. Let's stick with that for now. If we want, we can change the inversions with these arrows. For those that don't know what an inversion is, it's just changing the order of the notes. So if chord 1 is ACE, clicking the arrow downwards moves that top E to the bottom. So it's EAC. Same chord, different order. Lets you listen to chords a little bit lower or a little bit higher without shifting a full octave. I did find some more strange behavior though. In fact, I think this one is just a straight up bug. I selected a 7th chord and I had the complexity up one, which added this lower octave here. Sounds good, but I wanted to try my own inversion. I wanted to take this top G here, the 7th. That was sounding a little high. I wanted to put that down an octave. That's quite a common voicing in dance music. But it didn't matter if I dragged them or used the octave function. For some reason, even though this G is not the bottom note, the bass moved to note 7 as if it was an inversion. The bass started playing note 7 on my 1 chord, And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to stop your bass following any inversions. Again, not very intuitive. Inversions certainly shouldn't be the default behavior. And in fact, if you just have a normal seventh at one complexity less, so it doesn't have that duplicate octave there, if you then use the inversion arrows, which will bring that G down an octave, now it's actually an inversion, but the bass is staying on the 1, as it should. This has to be a bug. Next, let me see if I can add a chord turnaround. I want to see if the bass follows. So this lane at the bottom shows the whole chord structure. Obviously, we just have 1 for the entire 5 bars. To change the structure, we split it with this icon here. I want to add 2 quick changes as a turnaround at the end. Kind of like move your body. Now, I don't have any chords playing in that space yet, but this did change the bass, so it appears to be following the chord changes. Good. Although if I didn't want the bass to follow, is there an option for that? Maybe we're just supposed to drag the MIDI out at that point. While we're on the subject, if I may point out a couple of inconsistencies with the UI, in the Chords, the Melody and the Deep plugin, you can instantly grab the MIDI, or the audio in fact, by just dragging from this bottom right bit here into your software. But only in the Beat plugin, it was hidden away in one of the menus. It's not really a big deal. I know the Beat plugin had more export options too, but combined with a few more observations I've got, the inconsistency does add to the overall confusion. The second inconsistency being this Save Preset button. It's down here on the Chords plugin, it's up here on the Melody plugin, and the Bass plugin does not have one at all. Surely that's an oversight? And the third UI design inconsistency, on the Melody plugin and the Bass plugin, if I want to change the octave, I can go to the Move tool, and there's an octave button. There is no Move tool in the Chords plugin. And again, if I try to do it manually, my bass changes. Not very intuitive. Anyway, back to this chord turnaround. Let me see if I can add some chords where the chords change. My instinct would be to go down here at the bottom and split the rhythm just like I split the chords. And it does have the icon. However, more strange behavior observed. Sometimes when I tried to add a rhythm, it would change the voicing of all of the chords in all the rhythms. It seemed that they defaulted back to their original complexity. Why are the notes changing when I'm only playing with rhythms? Is that another bug? Now, Captain Chords also has a play mode where you can use your QWERTY keyboard or a MIDI controller to jam. You don't actually have to press multiple notes to make a chord, you just press the one and it generates the chord for you. Nice idea. But the first time I tried this, I already had a pattern in there the way I just first showed you. So I tried to delete that so I could record fresh. But then my bass line completely changed. So again, it seems if you want to jam out your own chords, you probably have to do this first. That's a shame. I'm sure many would like to jam along to a bass line. Also, I noticed in the original demo 3 years ago, there was a rhythm tap function. I liked the look of that mode. I'm presuming that let you keep the chord structure in place, but then just tap the rhythm on one key, and it would follow the chord structure for you. However, that mode has since been deleted. Strange. Can anyone at Mixed In Key tell me if that's still possible in the current record mode? I couldn't seem to get it to do it. And while we're here, if any of you guys are watching, a small feature request if possible. Alongside complexity and inversion options, it would be great to have an actual dial for voicing. Meaning, at one end of the dial it would be cluster voicing, all the notes together as close as they could be, and at the other end of the dial the voicing would be spread out. Is that possible? Right then, the fourth plugin, Captain Melody. So this time when we click the plus, it does what we would expect. It fills the whole loop with a melody. I thought this might be behaving now because we had the chords in place, but I tested it without chords and it still does this, so more inconsistent behavior across the plugins. I wish the bass behaved like this. Not a bad melody as far as the first random attempt goes. Interestingly, it's used the same sound I had selected for my chords. Is that coincidence, or is that what it does? Anyway, let's look at some lead sounds. Good. Seems to be the same sound selection as kept in Chords, maybe. Well, I've no problem with that. If so, let's have a look at our interface. Top left, we have Create Idea. Let's check out some presets. I'm not sure why there's a whole 3 categories for triplets. That comment isn't an EDM bias either. I work in a lot of genres, and I can't think of too many which rely on triplets that often. Anyway, in the main window, we have a dice here for random. Let's have a look at that. As far as I can tell, that's randomizing within the preset, as opposed to making something completely random and nonsense. So that's good. Although I'm not sure what the difference is between pressing that and pressing this refresh here. Then up here we have layout, shape, rhythm, first note, and lanes. These all work together as a group. And when you select a preset, all you're doing is really setting up the parameters for these 5 groups. Shame the interface doesn't really make that clear. Let's tackle these categories. So layout, this sets an overall structure using 2 sections, A and B, and you can choose various orders of them. And if you've ever looked into making melodies, you'll probably have come across a term called call and response, or question and answer. That's a very solid way of writing a melody. So this lets you set that up. I tend to like 3 repeats and then a turnaround. So for that, I would select this one, A-A-A-B. And here we can select a length for each of those. So I'm going to say a bar for each section. As you can see and hear, each change is updating live, so that's good. Although if you stumble upon a section you really like, you can lock those notes in by highlighting them and pressing the lock icon. Well, in theory at least, I'll come to that later. Last on the layout tab is the toggle to be able to follow the chords. That's going to be very useful for creating more catchy and hypnotic lines. If you didn't know, most melodies don't directly follow the chord changes. It's more common that the melody stays in a similar area and the chords move underneath it. Anyway, now we've chosen a layout, we can use the random button to cycle through some variations. But we still have lots of settings to make, so let's look at those. I think looking at rhythm next makes more sense. Here you can control note length, the busyness, rests, which is how much space, in other words, and how often triplets turn up if you want to be awkward. The only thing I think this control set is missing is a syncopation amount. Either that, or it would have been nice to have the rhythms drop-down menu selection from the Chords plugin. Anyway, now we've got a rhythm dialed in, let's look at shape. So this is an interesting idea. It lets you choose how many steps, how many times it moves, and how big those steps are with leaps. And you can control the general direction here. And when selecting that, this dial pops up to control how often it changes direction. You can also update each section separately. But before we do that, we still have 2 more parameters to select. There's first note. This lets you toggle on and off which note is allowed to be started on by each section. And similarly, this section, lanes, That's like a overall percentage chance of any given note appearing, again per section. These two last functions are a bit scalar-esque, quite classical in approach. Sure, you could press and guess this, but it's one of those functions that works a lot better if you already know what notes would be better to begin with. Luckily, however, there's a much better way than using those last two tabs. One of my favourite features of all the plugins is this section down here, tension. You can simply adjust this graph up and down when you want more or less tension, without having to know anything about any specific notes. So if there's a bit that sounds weird to you, and it's high on the tension graph, reduce the tension, and vice versa. I think that is a fantastic feature. Well done, Mixed in Key. Now, however, you know what's coming. I do have some criticisms. I hinted earlier at some problems with locked notes. I found that if I tried to change the layout after locking notes, the locked notes would not be kept, even if that section remained in the same place. And also in the layout section, toggling follow chords was not consistent. One time I toggled the follow chords and my locked notes were not kept at all, and the new notes didn't even follow the chords. And another time when toggling it, my notes were kept, but the note lengths all changed. Very strange. Lastly, it does have a brush mode, just like the bass plugin. Same problem with the rhythms though. It's that whole screen selection menu that doesn't update live. And also, if you're going to get rhythms this way, inconsistent with the bass plugin, there's no rhythm section at the bottom. So if you want to add a different rhythm in and split it, you can't adjust that at the bottom. Nor can you assign preset rhythms to A and B sections. Shame. Oh, and Mixed in Key, if you are still watching, one last feature request across all the plugins, if you please. Swing. Yes, I know swing is in there. It's under this humanized dialogue here, but it's all presets, and the lowest one isn't subtle enough. The dial over here, which I hoped would be for the swing, is for note lengths. Please can we just have a swing percentage, like everyone else? Pretty please. Oh, and before I forget, the fifth plugin, I haven't mentioned that yet, that's called Captain Play. That lets you play in live. You can either choose melodies or chords. Same sounds, all of that, all good. But I didn't see the point, as all the other plugins have a live input mode already. Maybe it's actually for live performance, not live recording. Overall, I'm very impressed with these. I know I ended each plugin section with my suggestions and complaints, but as a total package, I think this is brilliant. And not just for beginners, and not just for kickstarting ideas. I think you could finish some ideas with these. In fact, I can think of some areas I would use them. And for dance production, it's absolutely the better choice than Scalar. And considering the price, absolute bargain. At full price, these are £99. I don't know if it's one of those where it's $99 across the pond, or if it's an equivalent like $120 or $125 at the moment. Not that there's any point speculating. With that Mango Mussolini in office over there, it'll probably change tomorrow anyway. So yeah, colour me impressed. Okie dokie, I hope you learned something. If you did, you know what to do. Please show your appreciation via the appropriate buttons. And if you're feeling extra generous, there's a link to buy me a coffee in the description. And until next week, I'll see you down there in the comments. Bye-bye.